Welcome back to the Fog and the Whirlwind. Really appreciate you joining me once more. I have a special guest today that I'm really looking forward to bringing back on and discussing politics, current events, and theory with NRX enthusiast. Wanted to quickly tell all of you guys out there that there's going to be some changes here on this podcast. I feel like lately I've gotten away from how I started to get big, which was to make you guys laugh. Lately, I think I've been talking about political theory and history in a educational way, which is one of my big goals. Because anyone who's been following me for any length of time knows that goal number one is to educate the right. But secondly, there is an aspect of this in which I love to entertain you. I want to, like Russell Crowe, yell, "Are you not entertained?" Something like that. And oftentimes I've left that behind because I've been trying to press the message just a little bit too hard, or at least in a way that I haven't preferred. Hasn't been as fun for me. I don't think it's been as fun for you. And so I'm going to be working on that. One thing that I would definitely want to bring back, and I started to do this whenever I did more live streaming with the one-to-one with Orkhan show, was satire. I really love writing satire and reading it out to you guys. And I think a lot of you guys have been following me because you enjoy the satire, because you enjoy the YouTube shorts where I make jokes. And so that is going to become a permanent part of the podcast. And I really hope that you enjoy it. So if anything, if any of the tone starts to change a little bit, it's likely actually come full circle back to where I started. Because I started out a little bit more like that, a little bit more joking around. And I do want to, at times, discuss things in a serious way. There's a time to make you laugh, and there's also a time to discuss something in a serious way. So it's not going to be complete just nonsense the entire time I'm recording, but it's also not going to be serious the entire time either. It's going to be a hybrid, and I hope that you guys enjoy that. So real quick, before you sit back, pour yourself a drink, or in the case of some of you, get behind the wheel and start driving, make sure before you do that, don't do this while driving, press the like button. And if you can leave a comment once you've come to your destination, let me know what you think of this episode. If you're commenting on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and actually now you can comment on Spotify. I would really appreciate that. The big thing I'm pushing right now is pressing the like button and commenting because that helps things out in the algorithm. But also, this should go without saying, if this is the first time you've ever heard me, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, following on Rumble, or wherever it is that you're listening to this. X, Spotify, Amazon Music, or Audible. All right. Sit back and enjoy listening to me talk to NRX enthusiast. Welcome to the most recent episode of The Fog and the Whirlwind. I'm joined today by a blogger and political commentator. He is on X under @PABullerDude. Instagram is NRX Enthusiast. And also you need to go look him up on Substack. Search Gutterballs there by State Champ Bowler Dude. By the way, guys, there's links in the description, so don't worry about if you're having a hard time finding it. And he joins me now. NRX Enthusiast, thanks again for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me as always, Josh.
Okay, let's begin with something that you wrote that I really got a lot out of, and the audience will as well. You wrote an article here that I want to bring up on screen a little bit. Pragmatists versus hardliners. The right-wing vanguard has split into two distinct groups. And I'm going to read a little bit of it here for our audience. I've been throwing around a bunch of different descriptors for what I called in my title the hardline right, but I can't figure out any that I love. I'm open to suggestions. What I'm referencing in my title is the current disagreement that has effectively split the dissident right, or anti-establishment right, in two distinct camps. This split had existed, but was exacerbated after Donald Trump returned to the Oval Office in January of 2025. The split had previously taken other forms and centered around whether one was skeptical or concerned about Trump's sometime cozy relationship with Israel and its lobbies, and most supportive politicians, and also those who disagreed over whether or not to counter-signal Trump, Vance, and other key MAGA figures. What I call the pragmatic right, of course, which I tend to be a part of, though I sometimes see merits in the concern of the hardliners, does generally not obsess over Israeli and Jewish influences over the American government. We would rather not be involved in Middle Eastern affairs, but don't hyper focus on word or action that Trump says or does pertaining to that part of the globe. The pragmatists want Trump to effectively wield executive power to make life better here in America, particularly for heritage Americans who have been under attack from the left and mainstream right for years, particularly in the form of replacement migration, job outsourcing. And I have some other screenshots here. Yep. And let's see, reverse discrimination, job outsourcing, FYI, is just plain discrimination as a result of civil rights legislation. Pragmatists were very much in favor of the signing of the BBB simply because of the massive funding hike for ICE. Sure, they didn't love all the usual pork that goes along with huge bills, but understand that Trump, the consummate deal maker, had to include enough little juicy nuggets to entice all but two Republican representatives to go along with it. Understanding the reality of the current political situation, further inflating the deficit, was more than worth intensifying the battle against illegal immigration. A common refrain from this camp is that America can come back from a financial crisis, not a demographic one. Hardliners seem to live and die with every single word and decision coming from the president and his administration. So, real quick, I wanted to discuss this with you because I will say, and I said this in the prep a little bit, I think we're very simpatico. I would also put myself pretty firmly in that pragmatist camp as well. Though, like you said in the article, I definitely listen to some of the hardliners and see some level of merit in things that they say. But I really liked what you pointed out with a lot of these hardliners living and dying by everything that Trump says. One thing that I think is important for the audience to know is that you oftentimes have to take what Trump posts on Truth Social, especially, with a grain of salt. And so, with this article in mind, I think it's important to look pragmatically at Trump's term so far. And so, real quickly, I guess you can do this either out of 10 or you can give him a letter grade, A through F. How would you grade Trump's administration so far, NRX enthusiast?
I think you could break it down into a few different. I mean, if you want to give it an overall, I would say like a solid B plus to A minus. Immigration has been really strong from what I've seen, especially with the big beautiful bill and the ICE funding, and then the fact that he's already been, looks like there's already been some serious movement in terms of the deportation effort. I'd be curious, like once we actually see some statistics. Then again, I feel like any statistics that come out of, how many illegals or how many deportations, it all has to be taken with a grain of salt. But at least optics wise, and at least from what the overall feel of everything is, it looks like things are going pretty well in that arena, and that's the real big one. As for everything else, it's not necessarily on the forefront of every American's mind, but like I would have hoped for a little bit more, if we're being, if we're going to nitpick, I would have hoped for like a little bit better foreign policy. The strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities doesn't seem like a real big deal, although as it says in my article, that's like one of the things that the hardliner contingent seemed to be very, very much like, oh, here we go again, we're all want to die for Israel, like the same thing you hear every time. And it seems like nothing's really come out of that. And it also, there's still, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the Ukraine-Russia situation. Looks like there's a meeting with Putin supposedly coming up pretty soon. And I'm generally optimistic when it comes to Trump's foreign policy and his handlings with other foreign leaders. I have I feel like I have reason to be optimistic there. Um, Other than that, it's kind of been overall what I've expected. Minus maybe, um, I would probably argue the immigration stuff has been better than expected. Definitely better than it was in his first term. Because I think he's at least learned from some of his mistakes and some of his dealings with the permanent DC bureaucracies that fought him every step of the way back during the 45 administration. But yeah, back to your original point. I was kind of rambling there, but back to your original point, I would say like B plus to A minus.
How much of this do you think is that you're not so upset, and neither am I, because our expectations were not through the roof for him?
Yeah, and I don't think they can be. I mean, it depends on what your measuring stick is. Um, there's so many people that think that like Trump has to be this, like you have obviously the wackos that like think that he, wish he they wish like literally wish he was like the next Hitler. Which at no point was that ever going to happen or is going to happen. Um, but you have a lot of people that think that like, oh, Trump was only a good president if he, completely remakes America and basically turns us into like completely gets rid of every single, you know, non-white immigrant. Like it is very unrealistic. What a lot of people are saying, but I think part of it also is like people who, like, I think like we were even talking about last night, the people that want to be right, that just like to black pill because they like to be able to say, "Oh, I was right." I'm not going to let myself be disappointed. Like I'm just going to have the most low expectation, or I'm either going to have unrealistically high expectations that will never be met, and then I'll be able to say, "Oh, my expectations weren't met," and I can black pill, or the ones that just say like, "Oh, every single president's the exact same. It doesn't. None of it matters. Voting doesn't matter." Um, it's just Israel owns everybody. Um, yeah, I think you and I are more, for better or worse, you have to use, you have to use the executive power where, for better or worse, our system of government allows for the kind of crap that's been going on, like with rogue judges. It allows, Trump to, you know, pass, sign, whatever executive order or pass some sort of bill. And then obviously you have some liberal judge, stopping it at every turn. And our system allows for that for better or worse. And, after that, it's just like, yes, it's what's the Andrew Jackson line, like the courts have made their decisions, let them enforce it. Like that has to be the attitude.
I like the line you had just now about what is the measuring stick. And it's funny because there's a guy and he's a libertarian economist. He's not really one of our guys. I don't really listen to him anymore, but I did when I was a libertarian. And he was always asking the question, compared to what? You have to ask yourself, okay, because this is the thing. A lot of people, either on the dissident right or other spheres of the internet, will say, well, this is just copium or just coping to say, well, if you had had Harris, there would have been zero deportations. When in reality, one of the two was going to be president. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, And honestly, like you could make a really good case and say that, Trump's been the best president of our lifetimes. But at the same time, you could also say, well, the bar was pretty low. Um, I
Yeah, for
mean,
sure. I
every
mean,
every
look at Biden.
president, whether or not they came in with good, like good motives and came in with for the right reasons, every single one of them had to deal with, a massive bureaucracy and had to make concessions to donors that, these donors who have the kind of money that you can have to affect politics at that level aren't necessarily the kind of people that are going to be aligned with, your normal American. Like it's built in.
And I think that, and the thing is, too, a lot of people, and it's funny because I haven't even read anything from Gray Mirror recently, but I remember there was a quote from Yarvin a while back that so much of American politics is a sugar rush. It's all about,
Yes, I remember that.
yes, it's all about what's going on right now. And what people need to be focusing on instead of the milk, they need to be looking at the actual meat of politics and current events and what's really going on. And that's part of the other problem is so many people seem to have an idea, they at least seemed to, past tense, going into the 2024 election. Some of them seem to think that Trump was going to get in there and change everything, when really and truly it's not going to get overturned. Progressivism, as a squid with its tentacles everywhere, is not going to be killed in 4 years. And Trump hasn't even been in his full 4 years yet. He's only been in for a
Not
little
even a
more than
year.
6 months. Yeah, it's been 6 months and a little bit more than that now. So, with that being said, I think that's part of it. Is our expectations were lower of him. You and I are very much men of the right, but we weren't expecting him to just fix so much of this stuff. I would tend to agree with you. I think on immigration, he's doing a really good job overall. Some of the Truth Social posts that he had out there about, oh, we're not going to deport farm workers, sounded concerning, but the same guy, Walter Block, that I mentioned earlier about the compared to what quote, he
Yeah.
one time said this about Donald Trump. He said, if Donald Trump was a football player, he wouldn't be a quarterback, he wouldn't be a wide receiver, he would be a broken field runner. Because what does he do? He runs this way, then he runs this way, and then he ends up going the direction that he wants to go.
Yeah.
And that's
That's a good
pretty
analogy. I never heard that, but
accurate.
that's a good analogy.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good analogy because a lot of times Trump says a lot of stuff, and really I think it's helpful for people to, whenever they see a statement from Trump or a tweet or a True Social post, just say, okay, that's what he said, but let me watch what he actually does.
He's been that way ever since he's been in politics.
Yes. And people forget that. That's part of it too. I think you and I, with our analysis, we understand that. And some of these people, all they see is a tweet or a video and they think, oh, well, it's just over.
And in fairness to a lot of these people, I will say there are a handful of people who are like the complete opposite side, where they think that like literally everything Trump does is some sort of calculated like 4D chess.
Right.
And you just have to trust the plan, bro. Like you've seen that too. But I mean, honestly, I think reality is probably closer to that than it is like, oh, you just have to take everything at face value and he's just another puppet of the regime.
I do think there was a lot of overreacting to the MIGA tweet, MIGA, which was make Iran great again. Trump was talking about how I
Oh,
think
because
he's just
I think he did. Did he mention did he actually use the term regime change at one point?
yeah, he said everyone's talking negatively about regime change in Iran. And I think he tried to say that the deep state doesn't want regime change with Iran and we need to make Iran great again. And everyone, felt like everybody, including some people that I really like, got very upset. I was upset, but I told the audience Trump is probably going to do some strikes, maybe some Air Force or some drone strikes, and he's probably going to be done after that, which is what happened in Syria in 2017.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I I've I've maintained, like, the people who say that, like, Trump's going to start World War III, or I mean, well, you have like your deranged lefties that say that, but then you also have, the people. You have like the Groiper types that are like, oh, we're just going to die for Israel and fight in all these, Zog wars. Um, it's really like that's not based on any patterns. It's just black pilling. It's just delusional black pilling. It's not based on anything. It hasn't been. Um, Trump was the one guy that didn't start any new wars, during his first presidency. And honestly, if we're being honest, um, I think almost in his first term, he was kind of like a victim of his own success in a way. Because when he first got in there, I remember. I don't. This is a little bit of a tangent. I remember in like 2015, 2016 that like ISIS was a big deal. And there was enough, I don't know how many little terrorist attacks here and there, and then there was like, the big terrorist attack in Paris in 2015. And that was something that was on everybody's mind at the time. And Trump came in and pretty much like after a few months of his administration, you never heard anything about ISIS. Like he pretty much like went after them, and like I said, it almost made him like a victim of his own success. Because by the time like 2020 rolled around, obviously 2020 was its own animal, but by the time that all rolled around, everybody had forgotten about all that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So,
I
and I think
yeah.
like obviously he's not going to have to go up. He's not going to have to run again because it's this is his second term. But let's say Vance is running in 2028, and if they knock all this crap out right away, the American voter, which love my fellow Americans and everything, but there's a lot of just you can't that it goes back to my general criticism of democracy is people are going to people only see the shiny toy that's in front of them, and they're going to forget about the things from 4 years ago.
Right, and my point is that they have. I mean, regarding Trump in Syria, I think this is again part of our expectations. We voted for Trump in 2024 knowing that there were things that he did in 2017, 18, and 19 that let us down. And of course, in 2020, he did too with the whole Operation Warp Speed. But
Well,
we
and I
did
would
that.
even and I would even say with when they bring up Operation Warp Speed, I don't even look at that as like him. Sorry to cut you off there, but I don't even look at that as like Trump doing something bad, because I don't think Trump would have ever mandated people, like would have ever mandated the vaccines. I mean, obviously, yeah, the vaccines seem to have some, there's good reason that a lot of people decided not to take them, um, and it seems that there are some issues with them, but I at least think that even if Trump would have gone through with like did the warp speed thing, that I don't think he would have ever mandated them.
Yeah, I don't bring it up much. I was just sort of talking like the way they usually talk. These people were referring to.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but you and I knew this, but we still made the calculated decision. Well, the pros outweigh the cons,
yes.
and as a result, even though he did order some strikes, which you and I would disagree with, he did it in his first term too, and so we're not really surprised by it. He's a boomer age man, maybe a little bit of an older boomer age man that is not going to do everything we want him to do, but it's not to say that we're okay with everything he does. Again, like you said earlier, I appreciate the fact you brought up. There is a part of, maybe you could say MAGA, but more broadly, just Republican Party politics, who Trump can just do no wrong. If you criticize him, you're a liberal. It's kind of like with the Groypers. If you disagree with Nick Fuentes, you're Jewish, and if you disagree with Trump, with these Republican types, then you're a liberal.
Yeah.
And the concept of disagreeing with Trump bombing Iran is like, well, that means you're just some peacenik anti-war liberal. When the opposite is true, we're actually America first on our foreign policy and to the right of Trump, but we still are not going to, make a bigger deal out of it than it is, because, as you referred to earlier, he actually ended up kind of closing that situation down, and there's been at least a little bit of peace between Iran and Israel, and America's been a little bit less involved, which is great. I would say, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, the worst so far, the scariest, is the stuff going on with Epstein, because it's just unexplained. Because Trump talked about, before he got into office, he did express that he thought that Epstein killed himself, which surprised a lot of people. He said that on Tucker Carlson's show. But then as time went on, he also said he would do things like declassify or release the Epstein files. And now he's acting like these files are unimportant, that Epstein was just a creep. And the whole thing sounds like it's being shelved, if not hidden.
Yeah,
And it's very possible that the investigation is going to happen. He's trying not to telegraph that. But I want to hear your thoughts on the whole Trump versus Epstein thing.
yeah, I feel like he's been put into a position that there's, no matter what, there's not going to be really any perfect solution, because I'm sure with the way he's acting, I'm sure his name comes up in some way, shape, or form in there. And if you just go, if you just go in saying, "Oh, I didn't do anything wrong," yada yada yada, like people are going to think that you're guilty anyway. You know what I mean? Um. So I think there's at least some aspect of that. Trying to think of how, like, what's like the best way to say it. I just think he's in kind of a no-win position.
I think
Um,
that it's important to reserve judgment until he gets out of office. Because I would not be surprised at all if in a year or a couple of months something comes out with the DOJ or with the FBI, and people get something about Epstein, and Trump will probably say something about it. He may just kind of, at a press conference, just kind of shrug and say, yeah, the guy was a creep and a weirdo. But it's very possible that there is an investigation going on still. And until he gets out of office and nothing has been done, I remain optimistic that more is going to be done, because I think that part of the intelligence of Trump is that he tries not to telegraph to the left what he's going to do, unless he can do it in such a way where he sets them up for failure. I'm not saying
yeah.
it's all chess, but I think that there are times Trump is playing chess. Just because we
Oh, there
don't
are.
buy into the logic of, oh, it's all chess, man, doesn't mean that Trump is never playing chess.
Yes, I agree. And I would also add with the Epstein thing that the if there's any real big mistake, and I don't even know if you want to call it that big of a mistake, but any like weird like head scratcher was when he had like all the like MAGA influencers there with the files, like almost like it was some sort of like a photo op. Remember that he
Yeah.
had like DC Drano and like the rest of those like like just like mainstreamish MAGA
Yeah, I agree that
mouthpieces.
it looks weird, but it's hard to know how much of that is Trump setting that up or coordinating it, and how much of it is, I don't know what you want to say, the Republican Party
Somebody else, yeah,
con Inc. Yeah. So I
or
mean, Trump played into it, sure, but I don't necessarily blame him for that.
yeah. It was weird though to say the. I mean, I think it was
Sure.
weird. I didn't quite understand what the point of that was.
Well, as a result, it definitely makes me want to trust DC Drano less. And
Yeah,
people
I
like
mean, I
that.
was already kind of getting there after just like his. I mean, just generally, and it's like these like MAGA influencers. Like a lot of these guys, like they, I directionally agree with them on most things. Um, but yeah, I think there's still a lot of like residual, like just kind of conservative, like the like our type of politics, like what do you call it, like dissident right or the new right or whatever. There's still a lot of like residual like boomer conservatism that still has a lot of power
Without a
and
doubt.
still has a lot of influence. Like if you look at like even if you look at like even on Twitter or Instagram, like you see so many pages of like accounts for say like DC Drano or any of those other like more well known like mainstream accounts. Like they have like way more followers than say like some somebody who's like in the more like reactionary, like even like Aaron McIntyre or someone like that. Like I think he's got a good amount, but it's not like there's so many of these like influencers that have like a million followers, and it's like, who is this person? Like, have they said anything useful other than just like like boo Democrats?
Yeah, I agree. I do wonder about foul play when it comes to the Twitter numbers, and also
Yeah.
if there's a certain reason why they are being promoted to
Yes.
maybe get influence over the younger generation. Maybe it's younger and older. But I agree. I wonder about that for sure. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on Vance's role in this? I think it's probably pretty reasonable to think that if Pence were vice president right now, it's very possible that he would have been in Trump's ear during the whole Iran situation, saying, we are going to need to go in there and invade. I do think it's very possible that JD Vance has been a voice of reason when it comes to an America First foreign policy. Do you think that's fair to assume?
Yes, I agree. I don't know if, I mean, yeah, maybe Pence would have been someone pushing Trump a lot harder if he were still in there. I frankly don't. I mean, I wonder often how often that during the first administration, how often Trump deferred to anything Pence said. Because I thought, he was good on certain things. Um, but yeah, as time's going on, you can see he's one of those just Republican Party holdovers. But I've liked a lot about Vance, and I do hope that the overall that the the right wing in America, or the GOP tends more in that direction, um, and that people like Vance are the future.
Hopefully, it's certainly better than the alternative that we've
Yes.
had. Let's look now that we've talked some about Trump's overall first term. I didn't even mention this in the prep. Well, maybe I did by text message. What do you think about 2026? Do you think that, would you say, because I think I see a lot of chest beating. A lot of Republicans, especially these influencers you're talking about, are like, yeah, the Dems are down and we're just going to sweep the midterms. And I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I think that it's very much up in the air. What are your thoughts on 2026 and how it's going to play out?
No, I would say it's up in the air, and then you know, like I'd said a little bit ago, like people remember the shiny toy that's sitting in front of them, and they don't remember what happened. People might forget about the all the deportations. Um, I mean, hopefully they continue, obviously, but that like kind of the early, the first 60 days or whatever it was that Trump was in office, and it was just a absolute just tour de force from Trump and his administration on, deportations and, trade deals and this and that, like people are going to forget about that stuff. So, you can't have any slip ups. No, the Republican Party has to, they have to help him out and do good things overall, or people won't turn out. And the people that do turn out will be, it'll be like 2018 was.
I definitely think there's an aspect of truth to that. I think that some of this is hanging on Trump. I think that if the Trump economy is really coming back strong in 2026, like early to mid 2026, jobs are starting to come back, money's being made, then I think the chance of the Republicans staying in office is high. What I do worry about is twofold. Number one, the Democrats harping and harping on some tiny thing that's not going up. Let's say things get better overall, but wages don't go up. There are certain Democrats out there who are going to hype and hype on that. And as a result, they're going to get in there. And so that's A, basically the Democrats taking over the House or the Senate or both. That would be horrible. But secondly, I also am not so thrilled about phrasing or framing this as, well, if the Republicans stay in power, it's good. If they don't, it's bad. Because I want to see people more like us in the Republican Party getting in office. And there's too many people who are too close to the center. Lindsey Graham, which is in my state of South Carolina, is running for Senate. Unfortunately, Trump has endorsed him, so it's very unlikely he's going to be kicked out. It's probably going to be him staying in the Senate for 4 more years. And as a result, it's disappointing, but that's most likely what's going to happen. And what we need are good men running against the deep state actors so that we have a more radical Republican Party that'll actually get into office and get things done. And so I worry that too many people are going to say, well, as long as they have an R next to their name, I'm going to vote for them. And that's not how we win in the future. Is that
No.
your concern at all? Do you see, am I reading the terrain correctly, that a lot of people seem to just be looking at, well, the Republican Party just has to win?
Some people I think operate that way. I think that at least at this point, the fact that Trump is kind of someone who is got the has the loyalty of the Republican base and has the ability that if he wanted, like, he's as I've said before, he's a deal maker. Somebody like Lindsey Graham, obviously I don't like Lindsey Graham, you don't like Lindsey Graham, but somebody like that, at least while Trump's in leadership, that's a person that has to go along, at least to some degree, has to go along with Trump, or you get called out, or he might get called out. Like
True.
look at Trump going after, and this is one thing where back to my whole hardliners versus pragmatists thing. This is one of the things where you have Trump going hard after Thomas Massey.
Yeah. What are you thinking about that?
Well, the skeptic, there's two ways you could look at it. There's the way where it's like, his Israeli handlers are telling him to go after Massey. And then there's also the way where it's like Massey has been the one vocal Republican representative speaking out against like Trump's signature piece of legislation. And basically he looks at him like, oh, this guy does nothing but grandstand. He doesn't get anything done. So screw him. Let's get somebody in here who can actually work toward, making America great again. And so I can definitely see, I can understand both ways.
I would
I
say
and
for
I
go ahead.
will say, and I'll add this, like I would like to see, if Trump's gonna go after Massey, I would, go after, Republicans that have gotten in his way. You I would like to see him go after some of the establishment Republicans that have made his life difficult.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
why are you going after the one guy who's, it's like, okay, fine, go after Massey, but heck, there's a lot of other ones that suck
Spot on.
and
I
suck
agree.
worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. I don't think he's the one to go after. Again, like you said, it's nuanced. I can understand why. Someone I was listening to actually made an interesting point. He said, I really like almost everything that Thomas Massey does, but not that he says, which is weird on the one hand, but he doesn't mean what he says in terms of like giving a speech, but in terms of going on Twitter and some of the backbiting or ankle biting against Trump. He just thinks that it could be done in a more effective way of trying to talk to Trump, try to do things. And
Yeah,
maybe
I would
I'm
agree
not
with that.
I'm not saying that Massey's never talked to Trump, but a lot of with Trump, I think you got to do is give him the perception that you're going right along with him, and then he'll listen to you a little bit more and change some of what he does. And I think Massey instead has been saying, well, let me just vote on principle because if I vote on principle, I'll get reelected. And again, I understand that. But with that being said, it's certainly pits the Republican Party against each other. I'm not saying we should. I'm far from Reagan's 11th commandment of, well, the 11th commandment is you should never criticize a fellow Republican. I routinely talk about Republicans and how they fail to be right wing. So I would be the
Yeah,
biggest hypocrite if I ever said that. But you have to do it in a constructive way and in a way that is reasonable and I think intelligent. And sometimes with Massey, I don't think he does so. I think that probably what he should have done is did his best to fix the one big beautiful bill and then eventually say, pragmatically, this is the piece of legislation that is going to go through. I've tried, I've done everything that I could, but I will vote for it because we need to take care of immigration. That's one thing I will say, from what I can tell, I disagree with Massey on. His record on immigration has actually not been the best. He hasn't voted for out and out amnesty, but he's not a hardcore immigration hawk like a lot of Trump's base is.
no, no,
So
he's very libertarianish,
yes,
and same with Rand Paul as well. Who, and like I said, I generally like both of them. And I think that there is a use for libertarian, at least some sort of libertarianism within the right. Um, but it has to be at least one that's like understands how to, like liberty should be the goal, not the means.
I think
Like if
there's a
you
lot
want,
there.
like if you want to get to the goal of like, libertarian, some libertarian utopia, like, then I would say, yeah, you need order. You need the deportations. You can't have illegal immigration. And I'll go even further and just say that a lot of the groups that have, a lot of the nationalities and ethnic groups that have been imported into the U.S. en masse are not conducive to libertarianism.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that there was a time on this podcast I frequently spoke against libertarians because I had been one, and I think I was just kind of going through the leaving libertarianism because I was seeing all the worst parts of the Libertarian Party. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that and I actually have, I'm not going to be able to show it right here, but I have Tom Woods and a Ron Paul book right here. And the reason I do that is because I'm willing to recognize that right libertarians are different than whatever you want to say, Libertarian Party libertarians or left libertarians. And I don't agree with the right libertarians on everything, but I'm willing to say that they have a correct viewpoint on certain things, particularly with getting off the back of the working man, allowing them to be entrepreneurs and things like that, and low taxes. I don't think that if you work really hard in this country, that you should have to pay a whole lot of money in taxes. You shouldn't be taxed to death. I think that that's a big problem that a lot of people have. That a third or half of your income's being taken out. And the libertarian argument makes a lot of sense there. There's also a book called Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal by Joel Salatin. He's a farmer in Virginia. And he goes into all the stuff, and a lot of it is USDA regulations on farmers that are just asinine. How you can't sell milk, you can't do this with eggs, you can't sell chicken meat that you butcher yourself. It's crazy. And whenever I listen to that, it makes me want to be a libertarian again because, like, man, this government does not need to be in the way of these people. This is crazy. So I agree with you that there is a place on the right, especially like the dissident hard right, that should make a home for people like Tom Woods, Lou Rockwell, Ron Paul.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's read a little bit of you have an article, another one that I wanted to read a little bit, and then we need to get ready to talk to the paid supporters. You have this article. I'll put up a screenshot here. If I have one, actually, I think I might be able to screen share. Is there a right wing alternative to MAGA? This is an article that you wrote in July the 20th, so not a really, really long time ago. And I wanted to read a little bit of that with you and just kind of get into some thoughts on that. So, one thing you said here, as I mentioned previously, there's a growing divide on the illiberal or dissident right between two factions that I have labeled as pragmatists and hardliners. As the Trump administration seems to be attempting to bury their polarizing response to the Epstein files, the hardliners' discontent with MAGA seems to be reaching a boiling point. Those fell for it again memes are out in full force. Um, and then on the other hand, the pragmatists are doubling down on their support of Trump, reiterating that in regard to the Epstein files, while the administration may be mishandling the situation, are of secondary importance to deportations. This battle has gotten more fierce as of late. As someone who aligns with the pragmatists, see previous posts, I genuinely want to know what the hardliners' alternative would be, and if it would be even remotely realistic. In my estimation, the hardliners are misreading exactly what Trump is and how he took over American politics. There are alternatives to Trump and MAGA, none of which seem to be viable. For a fun thought experiment, let's check some boxes that matter to the hardliners. Now, I'll say, as you lay this out, a lot of the stuff is really, really good, but I think that your point and mine would be you're not going to achieve this overnight. So, number one, America first, foreign policy, anti-Zog. Second, hawkish on legal and illegal immigration. Third, unwilling to compromise with the DC swamp. And you also have a number of reasons why Trump cracked the establishment where Ron Paul and you particularly mentioned Pat Buchanan couldn't. Number one, Trump was independently wealthy. He was popular, and his platform was popular, especially with blue collar whites. And third, that Trump himself is a force of nature. And so I think you would say, and you let me know, when you look at America First foreign policy and being hawkish on legal and illegal immigration, and then thirdly, not wanting to compromise the DC swamp. That is your ideal, is it not? These are things you want Trump to do.
Yeah, I think that's what all of us in our sphere want.
So what you take issue with is instead this idea right now of all or nothing, correct?
Yeah, it's and it's like okay, if Trump's not the guy, and if you're telling me that you shouldn't vote, like you know we gotta vote harder, bro, like those people, like what do you want to do? Um, like what are you going to do about it other than just black pill?
Well,
Is there anybody out there that that actually has a chance of succeeding. I mean, I would go back to what I've, and you being a listener of Pete Canona's show, um, he's somebody that stresses the idea that this should be done locally, and I have tremendous respect for people who are making those type of efforts, making that type of effort to you know work towards some self determination on a local level, um, rather than people who just constantly want to talk about how, like, oh yeah, government, Washington D.C. can never be fixed. Like, it's it's all over, bro. Like,
I think there's a difference too between someone saying that nothing's fixable and saying Washington D.C. cannot be fixed, but what you can fix is your local community,
yeah,
your town, your municipality, and then eventually down the road, your county, your state, which is something else you mentioned. Pete Quinones. That's another thing he's really advocating for. You had a line in your blog post that I wanted to read that I really thought was good. I have far more respect for people who have the hardliner views but are actually taking action. If you've completely disengaged, or if you are completely disengaging, pardon me, from electoral politics and trying to collectivize and build communities to better your situation, good on you. If you just like blackpilling online and posting "fell for it again" memes, that's gay. So if you want to sulk and blackpill about how the Jews are an omnipotent force that will destroy the West, go ahead, fine. Just let serious people actually try to bring about change. And to that, again, this is a big reason why I really talk about your blog. Bravo. I agree. There are
thank you.
people who very much feel the way that you're describing, but they're saying, you know what? Rather than just posting memes online, I'm going to do something IRL. And to those people, I take my hat off. I mean, I think all of us should be getting involved IRL. That's how you're going to have real lasting change.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I haven't done anything, but like I said, I'm not saying, I'm not saying that I'm someone who's the perfect example to follow, but I do have a lot of respect for those that have, and we should all strive to be like that.
and we're not obsessed with Monday morning quarterbacking everything. There are certain things we can say are wrong without being obsessed and just doing it in a bitter spirit. That and you and I don't do that. We try and call balls and strikes as clearly as we can, but we're also pragmatic and say, well, because again, there's a really good blog post written, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it was shared in the Pete Quinones show group chat of it was going to be either Harris or Trump. Now, with Harris, we very likely would be either in a hot war or very close to it with Russia right now. And with the whole situation with the Middle East, it would probably be no different. It might be worse with Harris, but it would at the very least be no different. But with Eastern Europe, with Russia and Ukraine, it would definitely be worse because Harris is a complete mouthpiece for the establishment. Whereas Trump, sometimes he listens to the wrong people, but occasionally he does stuff that's really good. And we can work with occasionally really good. We cannot work with someone who, like the Joe Biden administration, wants to lock us up or kill us in the case of the people that tried to kill Trump on the campaign trail.
Yeah, no, I
But,
I, I agree. I mean, I shudder to think what the immigration situation would be if Trump hadn't won.
oh, it's so much worse. I agree completely. Let me ask you something, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun before we then talk to the paid supporters. How do you see things going? I mentioned the Democrats briefly earlier for 2026. For the future, 2026, 2028, if you like, 2030 and 2032, how do you see the Dems going? Do you see the Dems finally realizing, we went a little bit too far, and wokeness is leaving a bad taste in people's mouths. Things aren't going so well, and so by all means, we're going to keep preaching the same gay, race, communist stuff, I like you. We like using that term versus woke. We're going to push that, but we're going to push it in a sneakier, more subdued way. Do you think they go that route, or do you think they basically say, nah, screw that, racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobe, and they basically just double down on their rhetoric and get more extreme? So, in other words, do they get more extreme but try to make it look like they're not, or do they get more extreme, or are they pretty honest about that? Which direction?
Um, I think the people, like the ones that are truly in charge of the party right now, like the establishment, I, they have to pay lip service to the radicals. I could see them getting more extreme, but also trying to do it in a way that's like you said, kind of not as obvious. But I do think that there are so many radicals, and you look at, I mean, this even goes a little bit to what I know you and I were talking about Dave Green's article, his long essay about
Yes.
progressivism dying. And this goes a little bit to him, like all of a sudden you have like an Indian guy, like socialist, running for mayor in New York City, who's probably going to win. And then there's like a Somali guy did he win the Dem nomination for mayor in Minneapolis?
I haven't seen that.
Or he's at least in like a pretty good shape
Mamdani.
to win.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know
there's a
about
guy,
Mamdani.
yeah, Mamdani, and then there's a guy in Minneapolis who I think won the Democratic primary,
Oh wow.
and he's Somali, which I mean that's pretty much what that city is at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but it's like this. It's like whenever you have all these like old guard Democrats that are trying to they're fighting like a right now they're like fighting like a two-front war. Like they're fighting Trump and they're fighting an ascendant right wing, but then they're also trying to like keep control of their own party before it gets completely like I don't even know if I would want to even say like you could say woke, you could say the gay race communism, but it's like almost like a third world. It's becoming like a third world party at this point.
Yes. Yes.
And it's but it's almost like it's their own doing. It's you build this coalition, and now the coalition takes power, and they're just going after it's bio-Leninism. It's third world, just everybody fighting over scraps. Like I think even Mamdani in one of his, he even said, I don't know if it was in a tweet or like one of his campaign like some sort of campaign thing where it was like explicitly about like redistributing from like predominantly white areas. So it's gone from like we're it's like in between this like woke like gay like academic-y like thing. Now like it's this third world like global third world party at the same time. So there's a lot of I do agree that like that party is in really rough, like it's in like critical territory. If someone doesn't steer the ship the right way, it could all go down, which honestly would be great. But I what replaces that?
On a more humorous side, it would be very funny at some point during a debate, maybe for president, for someone to get up on the Democrat side, maybe someone who's from the Middle East or has family from the Middle East, because they would need to be born here, and starts where they're asked something about gay marriage and they give kind of like a non-committal answer. And then some white progressive gets up on stage and says, I proudly stand with our LGBT allies, and I think that everyone else should too. And then the non-white Democrat who answered the question first gets like visibly angry and says, that is wrong because you are trying to discriminate upon our Islamic brothers and sisters who live in this country who don't feel the same way about the LGBT, and then like this really awkward moment of tension on stage between who's going to win, the non-white liberal who isn't so woke on the LGBT stuff, or the white liberal, but since they're white, they're therefore evil. And so it's really a snake that's going to eat its own tail. And I'm not saying that like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm saying, like you're saying, these factions of the left are going to end up eating each other to the point that it may all go down, or it'll just continue to ruin this country in the process, or both.
Yeah, it could go a lot of different ways.
Right. Well, before we say goodbye to the people watching on Spotify and YouTube and instead talk to the Substack subscribers, let's have a little bit of fun. This is a new segment that I want to bring out, and we are going to have a round of is it fictional news or is it factually true? I'll explain the rules in a moment. Here's our intro. Welcome to Is It Factually True or Is It Fictional News? What I'll be attempting to have go on in this round of the show, this segment, is I'll be presenting 3 stories to our contestant and RX enthusiast. He will then guess, is this real? Did this actually happen? Or is it cleverly written satire? All right, NRX, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so here is round 1. You're going to be guessing, did this actually happen or not? Here we have a tweet from Jennifer Foyle. AEOE's American Eagle and Aerie brands apologizes to our customers for the marketing phrase, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. We realized this phrase was offensive. Everyone in leadership and in our marketing team would like to extend a sincere apology to everyone we hurt. And this was tweeted yesterday at 7 p.m., followed by another tweet. American Eagle and Aerie Brands has removed its relationship with Sydney Sweeney. We apologize to everyone that has been harmed by our recent summer marketing campaign. American Eagle remains committed to inclusion in this industry and standing against prejudice everywhere. All right, NRX. So my question for you is it fictional or is it factual? Is it factually true or is it fictional news?
I'm going to say fictional because if I'm not mistaken, um, they were already asked to apologize and they didn't.
Okay. And the results, the answer, fictional news. You are correct. So you win that one. Well done. All right. So now for our second story, and we'll see if you continue to impress the audience here. We have a story and a True Social post. Trump calls former Georgia Lieutenant Governor total loser for swapping from Republican to Democrat. He says good riddance. Now keep in mind, this looks real, but so did the tweets just a minute ago. We also have here a True Social post from the president. Failed former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan of Georgia is a total loser. Was never able to get anything done. All he did ever was complain. We didn't want him in the Republican Party any longer, so I'm told he became a Democrat. Good riddance, Jeff. You don't even have a chance. So, NRX enthusiast, once more, is it factually true, or is this real? So, is this real, or is it false? Is it fake? Is it fictional news?
I know very little about this situation, as in like nothing, but I'm just going to say that it's true.
You are correct. This is real. This is factually true. This has happened. Which, by the way, just to take off the fun hat for a second, I did not know that. I did not know that Jeff Duncan had left the Republican Party till I saw this True Social post. I was just scrolling on True Social looking at recent things Trump had said, and I read that and I thought, because I remember Jeff Duncan from the whole 2020 debacle. Brian Kemp and Jeff Duncan were dealing with the whole allegations of voter fraud, and Trump was talking with them. But it sounds like Jeff Duncan actually got upset enough to leave the Republican Party. So we live in an interesting time. We really do.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I do specifically remember that their Secretary of State. I know Trump was mad at him for like I know he fought him pretty hard over the vote counts and stuff.
He sure did.
And that guy was a Republican, but he was definitely playing on the other team.
Yeah. All right, so now for round 3 of is it factually true or is it fictional news? Here we have a tweet from Kash Patel, FBI Director Kash. At the Federal Bureau of Investigation, we remain committed to finding criminals and turning them over to the Department of Justice with all the evidence to put them behind bars and to keep them off America's streets. We will continue to do this job to the best of our ability. This was tweeted this morning at 10 a.m., which had a lot of people speculating that something was about to happen, and they ended up being correct. Of the Attorney General of the Justice Department, AG Pam Bondi tweeted, Ghislaine Maxwell has taken a plea bargain with the Department of Justice and is being placed into witness protection. Per the terms of her plea deal, all of the DOJ's legal prosecution against her shall cease and desist as of August 9th, 2025. All right, NRX enthusiasts, time for you to answer now. Is it factually true or is it fictional news?
I'm going to say it's fictional.
You are correct.
I definitely wanted to believe it was fictional.
Well, you were correct, and you won all 3 rounds of is it factually true or is it fictional news. So congratulations and great job. You had a really good BS meter. You were able to tell, okay, that probably isn't real, but then with the whole Trump True Social post, you're able to tell that it probably was true. So well done on that. All right, now we're going to close out that segment of the show, and instead, we only have about another 10, maybe 15 minutes. We're going to talk to our paid supporters about the red pill and progressivism. So thank you, everybody who has been listening on Spotify and Audible. Make sure you get that would be really good. I'll edit that. Don't worry about it. I want to make sure that everyone goes to the whirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Make sure you follow NRX Enthusiast at PA Bullerdude on X. You can also go to Instagram and follow him, NRX Enthusiast. Make sure you're following him on Substack as well. Search Gutterballs on Substack by State Champ Bullerdude. There's going to be links in the description, and we'll see you later. Welcome, guys, on Substack. Those of you who are our paid supporters, my paid supporters here, listening to my discussion with NRX Enthusiast. One thing that we were talking about in the prep for the podcast was your article about the levels of the red pill, and I wanted to at least briefly look at that together. One of the hobby horses of the online right is talking about how we became red-pilled. It always makes for a good discussion. We're all united in one way or more by a skepticism toward not only mainstream media and its narratives, but even aspects of contemporary American culture and the things we've been immersed in since birth, such as a positive view toward things like equality, progress, democracy, and human rights. I'm going to pause real quick. Can you hear me, man?
Yeah, it is a little crackly, though.
Okay. Sorry. Hold on. Just hang tight. Okay, how's this? Any better?
It's still crackly.
Okay. How's this? Any better at all?
Keep talking for a minute.
Any better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it's still like staticky.
Hmm. Okay.
It started maybe, I don't know, not even 5 minutes ago.
Is this any better?
No.
Can you still hear me? I tried resetting my microphone. I'm sorry, it's crackling real bad. Can you hear me? All right, now you're muted. Maybe you're. Can you hear me? How?
It's a little bit better.
Okay. I've tried disconnecting from my Wi-Fi. I've also tried resetting my mic. It hasn't really been working very well. But can you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can understand you.
Okay. Sorry about that. We'll edit it later. Briefly, I saw your face, so I'll make sure when I edit that I edit that out
Oh
completely.
yeah, I was trying to hit the mic button and I accidentally.
Oh, it happens. It's okay. All right. Well, go ahead and I guess mute yourself, and I'll read a little bit of your article, and then we can comment on it. I'm sorry my audio is crackly. I don't know why. Okay, so back to it. One of the hobby horses of the online ride is talking about how we became red pilled. It always makes for a good discussion. We're all united in one way or more by a skepticism toward not only mainstream media and its narratives, but even aspects of contemporary American culture, the things we've been immersed in since birth, such as a positive view towards things like equality, progress, democracy, and human rights. Even if you're someone who intuitively knows that the media is biased or lies in service of the left, we've all gone beyond this. How long have they lied? How much of our history is lies? Many people, even many who support President Trump and his agenda, won't question the basic moral foundations, equality, progress, democracy, human rights, etc., but will just acknowledge that certain things have gone too far. And then you have a screenshot from the Royal Surf asking what red pilled you. Then you look at the levels of red pilling. Number one, the media is biased. Number two, the media has an agenda. Three, the media, deep state intelligence agency, and other powerful interests collude in order to implement a leftist slash globalist agenda. And then you have number four, democracy is the problem, not the bad politicians. Number five, tribalism slash in-group preferences are universal, but are extremely powerful motivators, particularly for certain groups. And then you go on to explain some of this article. You end with being red pilled is really quite simple. Simply understanding that democracy in a multicultural society incentivizes identity politics will get you most of the way. And I agree with that completely. So let's discuss this article a little bit. And I'm sorry if any of the audio has been bad. I don't know what's been going on. I apologize. But when it comes to what you think is the biggest stretch from being a normie to being red pilled, what do you think is the hardest pill to swallow, would you say?
That that's tough. I'm trying to think for me. Like what did I hang on to um the longest? And it was probably it was probably just the idea of like democracy being good. Like if you present a rational argument to somebody why they should support, you know, this side or that side, like it's just so ingrained in us that that's a good thing, and that's, you know, how a civilized society operates. And you know, it doesn't matter what, you know, someone's, you know, race or religion or this or that. We can all just, you know, believe in, like, you know, facts and reason. And that's just it. I kind of laugh at it now, but I truly believed all that.
Me too. I would say for me that goes the distrust of democracy. goes right hand in hand with number 5, which had to do with in-group preference. Tribalism slash in-group preferences are universal, but are extremely powerful motivators, particularly for certain groups. Because
Yeah,
I
like
think, yeah,
yeah, like another like a good example of that was like back in 2020. I remember every now and then you would see a poll that would say like, oh, the black vote is like really like getting behind Trump this time, like. And to me it's like, oh, well, yeah, their communities are being, and this is during all those riots and stuff, and it's like, yeah, their communities are being burnt down. Of course they're going to, of course that makes perfect sense. They would support, at least go against the side that's like encouraging it. And no matter how you cut it, it's like every non-white group pretty much vote is like pretty much a solid voting block for the left.
yeah,
And that's
and
like that really hasn't changed much. Now Hispanics um have become more right wing. But even that, it's like it depends on, it depends on a few other factors as well. But pretty much like every voting block outside of like straight white Christians is a super majority left wing voting block.
that includes Jews who look white. That includes white
Yeah.
atheists. Because white atheists are very overall, I would say, tend toward being left wing.
Oh, very
Um,
much so.
but with that being said, sorry if y'all hear the dog in the background. With all that being said, like for example, Dick Morris has a book. I think at one point was in the Clinton administration, but has since moved a little bit more towards the Republican Party. He's not really a real right winger. He's not even particularly conservative. Because in his book, The Return, which is about Trump running in 2024, because he's a friend of President Trump's, he talks about how, well, the Democrats, or I should say the Hispanics, they vote something like, they used to vote 80-20, now they vote 70-30, and therefore they're individuals and they should be judged as individuals. And it's like, okay, I agree that as Christians we should judge our fellow man in a kind and charitable way, but you also have to have basic pattern recognition and say, look, if
Yeah.
I have a group coming into the country and say 70% of them are voting against me, that's not a good thing. I'm not okay with that. And you have to recognize that. And look, has Candace Owens and Jesse Lee Peterson and people like Brandon Tatum done some really good work with getting black people to not vote for the left? Sure, but it's something like 90-10 vote for the Democrats. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend, well, the black community is a monolith if we're going to look at this in racial categories, should not be viewed negatively as far as their voting habits are concerned. I'm going to say no, they actively vote in their, what they perceive to be their interests. And what does that mean? That means at the expense of white America. You said heritage America. And the reason why I mentioned earlier that number 5, the fifth stage of your article when it comes to the red pill is concerned, why that was so hard for me is because we've been beaten in our heads so long, don't be a racist. To say anything else aside from individualism and Adam Smith and John Locke, that is racism, and you should never ever be a racist because that's evil, that's Nazi Germany, that's KKK, and
Yeah.
it's really not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and honestly, you can feel, you can have, you can be red pilled and understand these dynamics without being hateful toward anybody. It's just understanding that it's like, it's just it's human reality.
Well, and furthermore, I would even argue that I don't want to get back to the 1930s, regarding America or otherwise. We'll just leave it at that. I want something older. Part of being a reactionary, large R, is to aspire for Christendom. I want, really, when it comes down to it, a monarch. I don't call myself a monarchist. I tend to call myself like a reactionary or a Christian nationalist. But I want aristocracy and hierarchy. And a part of that is what it means to be a man on the right, to not be egalitarian, and to not want democracy, because democracy has been a disaster. Part of that can mean, yeah, does any of that mean like the Republican Party, America First faction in the 1920s wanting to stay out of Europe? Yeah, that's an off ramp that we should take that off ramp and espouse Russell Kirk and Robert Taft, and then in the 90s it kind of resurfaced with Pat Buchanan. Sure, but that's still like that's a good direction to go. But you and I want to go directionally further, which is more like a hierarchical. And some people are like, well, that means you want to have feudalism. And it's kind of like the Chad face. Yes. Like I hope I don't speak for you, but would you generally speaking say you would prefer something look more like feudalism and less like what we got now?
I mean, compared to what we have now, yeah. I actually really like, and I don't know if Yarvin talks about this that much, but one of like his, I think it's one of his earliest works was when he talked about patchwork. The kind of the Hoppian thing, the 10,000 Liechtensteins. I'm not sure if you've read Hoppe. I mean,
I have his book, A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism, and I have Democracy That God That Failed. I've heard some other writings that he've had people have read them out loud, but I haven't listened or read either one, but I want
yeah.
to.
Now I
It's
think
good.
that would be like the thing to like. That would be like the perfect system to aspire to. Just smaller units. And less obviously less democratic,
Yes.
but I understand something like that's going to would take a long time, and I'll settle for at least not like gay gay managerialism.
Right. Another article, I think he wrote it. I forget if he wrote it on Muses or where. It may have just been part of his book. Hoppe wrote an article. I want to say it was something to the effect of libertarianism and the alt right. And Pete
Yes, I
Quinones,
had
yeah,
this at one point.
yeah, yeah. Pete Quinones read it on his podcast, and it was a very interesting article because we were talking earlier about the hard right and there being a place for libertarianism within it. And I think that that's somewhat what Hoppe addressed. Now, also, and I'll show this book, The Reactionary Mind by Michael Warren Davis, he also talks about some of the merits of libertarianism and monarchy. And actually, so I've also had Chayada Murcia on the podcast, and he talks about being both a reactionary but also being a libertarian. Because the mindset is having hierarchy, having a king, but that king not doing much other than basically crushing degeneracy and upholding order. Other than that, he kind of stays out of your life. He allows you to plant your crops. He allows you to raise your children. He's not going to get in your business and say, no, you're going to do as you're told because I'm the tyrant. Because there's a difference between a monarchy and a tyranny. And I think even again, I'm not huge on Yarvin. I've listened to almost all his interviews, but I haven't read all of his book. But he talks about the term dictator not needing to necessarily be a bad thing. Tyranny, tyrant, is by definition bad, but dictatorship or monarchy is not. And that's one thing that Chayada talks about, and then Michael Warren Davis in this book talks about. And actually, Tolkien, and the author of the Lord of the Rings, that Tolkien, a lot of anarchists like to cut the quote in half, where he says, "My political side tends towards anarchy," but then he finished it with "and monarchy." He really liked the concept of a government that was strong but had hands off of the people and allowed you to live your life, except for whenever you were actually doing things like, telling people that someone was out to get them in the case of the blacks about the whites, saying, oh, the white man just wants to kick you down or lock you up or whatever. Uh, and then, and so, yeah, I think that that's something that we talked about both to the public audience, but we can now talk to the paid supporters. The importance of not cutting the libertarians their arguments, maybe them personally in the case of like the Libertarian Party, but some of the good people like what's his name? I can't think of it now. Napolitano and the aforementioned Tom Woods and Lou Rockwell and Ron Paul, they make a lot of sensible arguments for liberty, and so yeah, I think that's a good thing to think about because we should view people as individuals to a point, but we should also be willing to look at categories and patterns without being afraid of being shouted down as being like a racist or something or a hater. So,
I
uh,
agree.
closing thoughts before I let you go, because I want to let you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Any closing thoughts?
Oh, let's see. I can't really think of much. I mean, I had a good time chatting with you again. Always like being on here. Um, I don't really have anything much in the works right now, but I've at least gotten my, writing going on a little bit again. Is there anything else you can think of you want to talk about?
Well, in terms of the writing, are you trying to aim for one blog post a month or once every 2 weeks, or is it just more of a go with the flow situation
It's
with
more
just
to go with the flow. I would like to do. Honestly, I'd love it to get to a point where I'm doing, one a week. Kind of depends on what strikes my interest at the time.
okay?
And
Nice. Well, that's good. I definitely want people to go your way. They should follow you. As I've said, there's going to be links in the description. I think this is a good place to end it. I think we've had a very substantive discussion. And as I've said before in the podcast to people, my schedule has been going through a bit of a change of late, but I will still be having guests on when I can and making episodes whenever I can. And so, want to thank you again, NRX enthusiast. Other than Instagram, X, and Substack, anything else you wanted to plug before we get out of here?
no, that's really all I'm active on.
Okay, well, thanks again for coming on, and I'm looking forward to our next discussion. Hope you have a good one.
Yeah, man. Same to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching and listening to The Fog and the Whirlwind. Do me a big favor and press the like button wherever you are watching or listening to this. Make sure you are subscribed and following as well. The best place for you to keep up with the work that I'm doing is to go to Substack. I like putting my work out there because they are very committed to freedom of speech. They're also user-friendly. Go to The Fog and the Whirlwind .substack.com/subscribe. Again, that is the fog in the whirlwind .substack.com/subscribe. Also, look in the description of this episode to find me on social media. The links and the handles are all there. Thanks again.